And it says widget collecting, and there goes the cat in the background as usual. And the return of my Collecting Smart series, and tonight with special guest, the boy here at 7, Matt. How's it going, man?
Hey, brother, I am doing great. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to talk about some 9.8's tonight.
That is right. So tonight our subject is 9.8's and whether or not they're the only way to go or the smart way to go. And I think a lot of it depends on where you are as a collector and what your goals are. And so, Matt, if you're not familiar with his channel, and I'll let him kind of give the explain, but he is Mr. 9.8. If you're familiar with my channel, I am not. And a lot of that is I go a little bit into just where I'm at as a collector and why that is that I'm not Mr. 9.8. I read comic. I used to say I was a collector and I got back into collecting last year in 2018. Really, the answer is I was always a comic reader. Now, I would buy new comics and I would keep them in good shape and I would keep them, but I never really tried to get issues that I couldn't buy off the shelf. I was mostly just a reader of new books, and I'd read them and then I'd put them away. And so I really wasn't a collector, at least in my mind, until I got back in it this last time. Because then is when I started when I got back in last year is when I started seeking out books, older books that I didn't have or books I'd missed out on that I wanted, and started spending a little more for books. But my budget and just the fact that I collected in the 90s, so none of my original collection was worth anything, really. That's not completely true, but for the most part is I don't have a lot of to buy, sell, trade. I don't have a lot of collateral built up in my collection. There's not a ton of value there. So for me, I'm missing so many books, or so many books that I kind of want to add. It doesn't, in my mind at least right now, it doesn't make sense to chase 9.8's when I can get a 9.6 or 9.4 for significantly lower cost. And I could actually maybe get multiple books for the cost of that one 9.8. But that's where I'm at. You, Matt, are in a very different place as a collector. And so why don't you just talk about how you got here and where you are as a collector?
Yeah, man. So back in 2015, I was reading the Death of Superman story again. And these are books that I had as a kid. And I didn't have the next book I needed. And so I went out hunting at some of the comic shops. It'd been forever since I've been in a comic shop. And I found one. And as soon as I did, went home, read it, then I needed the next one. And so all of a sudden, man, this passion and this fire just started. I need to get every single book in this run. And I didn't even know it was called a run. You know what I mean? Like I hadn't collected since I was a kid back in the 90s, you know? So I went and started looking for everything I could. And I was just like you, reading everything. And I absolutely fell in love with the Death of the Superman story again. And I was able to finally finish it as an adult. And I looked at it and I had the whole thing, all the tie-ins, everything, man. I went on to Funeral for a Friend and then the Reign of the Superman and on, you know? And so it just lit this fire. And I started, okay, what's my other favorite run? And that's Infinity Gauntlet. So then I started going and looking for that, right? And so since then, I started collecting different runs. I started looking for books that I loved. Then I went into a comic shop, and as you know, with Amateur Hour, I got swindled pretty bad. Yeah. And so all of this stuff has led me to a point where just last year, I decided that I really wanted to focus my collecting on specific books that mean something to me. And because of my personality, I've always been really competitive, man. And I've got to have the best. I've got to be the best. And it's not because I want to be better than other people and not because I want to look down on anyone, because when someone gets the same book that I have in an 8.5 or a 9.0, I'm just as excited for them as I am when I get my 9.8, you know?
Right.
It's not about me being better than somebody else. It's just about, for myself, I want that 9.8, man, because that's the best of that book.
Right.
And so that's what I've got to go and get, you know? And so, I mean, a lot of people in the community saw and even participated in my mystery boxes.
Right.
So all the books that I had collected over the last 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, I lost like a third of my collection, man. And it was really hard to part with those. But as I've parted with them and they've gone to new homes and people, would get their box and say, I didn't know this was going to be in, like, this is amazing, man. They were happy. I got some money in return. And then I turned that around and got those same books in a 9.8. And so I, of course, because of that, I own less books now.
Right.
But like, as you see back here, I've got, for instance, Nova #1 in a 9.8 white pages. I had like 5 copies of Nova 1, and it was hard for me to get rid of them, but I did, and I was able to turn that around and pick up a 9.8. Shazam 1, I was able to get rid of some of those, and I had multiple copies and pick up a 9.8. So now that I look at my collection, yeah, I own less, but when I hold it and I see that baby like in a 9.8, man, it just feels so good,
I completely understand that. Well, before we go further, I'm going to shout out the chat a little bit. Hey, Unruly. We got Unruly Simeon in here. Rod the Rican is in the chat. Bake the Snake. I want to thank you guys for joining us.
What's up, guys?
So, if you guys have watched any of my videos, as I was telling Matt earlier, if you guys haven't figured out, like, I'm in research. That's what I do for a living. So, of course, I did a little bit of research, just out of curiosity, to kind of see. And I picked 25 what I consider modern books. I think when you're talking about 9.8, and we'll get into this a little bit later too, because I want to get your opinion on this.
Cool.
I think once you get into Bronze Age is a little bit of a marginal territory, I would say, with chasing 9.8. But once you get into Silver and Gold, it's a completely different category, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And so I really just picked out, and I even think Bronze is different than Modern. And what I consider, like, I didn't separate copper or anything. Like modern, copper to now, basically, is what I would consider modern. And at least for this purpose. So I just picked out 20. I want to go collect. I picked out 25 books in their, basically, in their kind of higher sales total books from the modern era. And basically looked for 9.8s that were somewhere between $200 and $2,000. And I have things on here, and I'm not going to go through this whole list of 25 because that'll be boring. But, New Mutants 98 is on here. Your ASM 300 I saw in the background. Detective Comics 880. Batman 608, the second print is on here. Invincible #1 is on here. Saga #1 is on here.
Cool. Not a modern, huh?
Yeah, and so some very modern and some late 90s, early 80s. Batman Adventures 12. So Edge of Spider-Verse #2. So just a mix of modern stuff that people chase. First Carnage is on there, 361. So I went through those and I did basically 3 comparisons just on the percent difference in the value, according to Go Collect.
Okay.
Because obviously these books range from 200 to 2,000. If you look at the absolute value, it throws it all off because it's all over the place. But just the percent difference for a 9.8 versus a 9.6, a 9.6 versus a 9.4, and then a 9.6 versus an 8.5.
Okay.
And my expectation, and I don't know what anybody's thoughts would be on what those average percent differences would be, was I was expecting basically the 9.6 to be like 30%, like a third lower to half lower than a 9.8 is what I was expecting. Well, the actual average came out to being half the price of a 9.8. A 9.6 is half the price of a 9.8 for those 25 books. Wow. And I just, like I said, I picked these at random. They range all over the board. I mean, there was one book, which actually is one of the books I have, which is this first Cassandra Cain Batgirl book. Is actually a 9.8 costs 71% more than a 9.6.
Wow.
And so you could literally buy 3 9.6s for the price of a 9.8. But
9.8
was like that 33%, basically a third. But they were all over, and the average came out right at 50%. So basically, on average, for those 25 modern kind of modern grails, I would call them.
Yeah.
You're looking at half the cost to get into a 9.6 versus a 9.8. And I actually have lived that because I only own 3 slabs at this point. I've only been back in collecting for a year. I haven't prioritized a lot of slabs. And one of them I only own because I went the 9.6 route. And actually this book is even almost doubled as a 9.6 since I bought it.
Sweet. I love that book.
Yeah. And so, because I got in actually pretty cheap on this book last summer before the trailers for Spider-Verse dropped or any of that kind of stuff.
Perfect timing then, huh?
Yeah, I got in perfectly on this one. But this is a book, this individual book is, where was it at? It's a Spider-Verse. It's actually, the 9.6 actually do pretty well compared to, it's only 46% of, difference between a 9.6 and a 9.8. So it's less than half, which is better than most, but it's still, a significant difference. And it's the only reason I own this book. I would have never bought in, because to date, this is still the only time I've spent over $100 on a book. That will change probably pretty soon, but I got to get myself rounded around on a couple books. But
cool.
So for me, at this stage of my collection and my budget, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And particularly when you look at the difference between a 9.6 and a 9.4, that difference is about 21% on average. So there's this, the drop off between a 9.6 and 9.4 is a lot less than a 9.6 or a 9.8 to a 9.6. And I told you, I didn't expect this at all. And this was completely random. The books were completely random. It was just me going through the Go Collect list. And the difference between a 9.6 and an 8.5, which I picked 8.5 because I felt like for a modern, that's about the if you're really trying to collect a slab, that's about the bottom that you would even consider accepting.
Yeah, it's kind of low, right?
And that's even probably low. To me, that was like the absolute bottom for a modern book. And the difference between 9.6 and 8.5 is 50%.
Wow.
So you're talking like a 50% difference between an 8.5 and a 9.6. And then that 50%
drops again
to go up to the 9.8. So you're paying a real premium for the 9.8 number.
Yeah.
And for you at your stage where you're wanting to narrow and focus. That makes sense. I understand it. For me, I'm not in a position where I could really do that even if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense for me right now to pay that premium if it keeps me from if I want on here an NYX and, I can get NYX and, where was the other book I was looking at? New Mutants 98 for the price of, at 9.6 for the price of NYX and a 9.8.
Yeah. 2 for 1 if you look at it that way.
And so that's where I'm coming from, but I've kind of dominated the conversation here with the numbers for a minute. So I want to get back to you and your thoughts on why the premium's worth it for you. You said it was because you were competitive, but
well, here's my thing. You don't want to get into a book when it is at the top of the hype, right? So for instance, I'll go with my New Mutants 98. I've got that 9.8 white pages, but I waited for a long time because I remember 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, it was going for $1,800.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was thinking in my head, okay, there's a lot of hype in this book. The movie's coming out. We already had movie 1. People are all about getting this book. It's not the right time to get it. So I waited till the movie part 2 came out. After part 2 came out, book died down. I ended up using a coupon, I think it was a 15% or a 20% on eBay. They do it once or twice a year.
Yeah, 15%.
Exactly. And so I waited till the book came down. I ended up getting it for under $700. And for New Mutants 98 and a 9.8, I was okay with that price compared to the 1,800.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a smart buy,
Yeah, no, that you waited it out. And that's, and there's to anything, whether it's a 9.8 or anything, doing your research, tracking the trends, avoiding the peak is a big part of just being a smart collector that we all talk about. Yeah. And so, that was, you did what you needed to so you could achieve your goal of the 9.8.
Exactly.
And that was, that's a really smart, thoughtful way to go about it. Looks like we had a couple more people come in. Ruben How's it going, Ruben? You're always in here, so I appreciate the support. Hey, John. Hey, Caleb. The Smurf is in here, so I want to thank you guys for joining us.
What's up, guys?
So now I've lost my train of thought here on where I was going to go next with that. So I'm curious for you. One of the things we talked about kind of before we got on here was there's obviously still a line on what you're willing to do, because you just said for the New Mutants 98, you waited. You had to be patient.
Yeah.
So what do you, I mean, for you as a collector now, and I know you have some books on your list that you want 9.8 that you ain't got yet, and there's reasons. So what do you see as kind of the line of where it's not worth? When does it become not worth paying the premium, and you're okay with something less than a 9.8? Or do you know yet?
You know what? Right now, what I'm doing is I've made a list for my 2018 want list, right?
Right.
So some of the books on there are like a Brave and the Bold 28. There is no way with the amount of money that I make that I'm going to get the first Justice League ever in a 9.8, right? It's just, it's impossible. So, so books like that, I pretty much am looking for a book that looks beautiful presented in the slab.
Right.
And I'm all about page color. So like with one of those, of course, the 9.8's out, the 9.0's out, a five is pushing it, you know?
Right.
Because you know, I set my budget, and on one of those books, I'd be willing to pay about $5,000, man. And that's what I was hoping to do after I sold my mystery box, find a good one right around that price point. The thing is that the perfect book never popped up this year as I've been looking, man. I wanted an off-white to white. I didn't want any writing on it. And everything that I really liked was above $8,000. And for me, that's just, okay, do I get one of those, or do I get like 10 smaller 9.8's, you know? And what I ended up doing is I ended up just getting a whole bunch of smaller 9.8's before they blow up, ones that people aren't talking about, like a Booster Gold, you know?
Right.
And before the hype came, I got the, I don't know if I can find it, but ASM 365, the first Spider-Man 2099.
Oh, 2099, yeah.
Yeah. And so like I thought, okay, before I know that there's going to be the Spider-Verse coming out, eventually this characters may get a movie, may appear. So I better get it now before the hype. And then what happens? The hype comes, and now the book's like shot up, you know? But luckily I was able to get it before that hype.
Right.
So for me, it's like I have my list. I know what I want, but I'm really particular about what I'm going to get. I can't settle. And since I couldn't find it and I had the money, I thought, you know what, let's spend it on 10 smaller books that nobody's talking about right now, so that if I ever need to in the future turn around and sell these books, I can sell them at a profit.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the mindset I've had since I did my mystery box sales. And I'm trying to stay away from the books in the hype. I'm trying to find the perfect the perfect copy. And that's why last week I jumped on a Journey into Mystery number 83. I'd been wanting that book for a while, the first Thor.
Yeah.
And I had the money from the mystery boxes. I was waiting around for a big book. It wasn't on my list for this year, but it popped up at an amazing price, looked beautiful. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to cross those off and get this one for this year, you know? So, I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing.
Yeah. And that's, you know, and that's what I respect about it. Like, because right now for me, 9.8s aren't necessarily the way to go. And John and J Hood Creative both made comments about that they chase raw books because of that, because you're paying the premium on the slab.
Yeah.
I do think that's a little different discussion, because you're always going to try to get the best raw copy you can, just like with a slab book or whatever.
Right.
And there's definite value there. I think when you get into older books, there's also a risk there of restoration.
Yes.
Things you got to look out for, but that's a little different discussion. But you have made, like, you're making strategic choices, which is always good, whether you're going for a 9.8 or a 9.6 or whatever.
Yeah.
Being strategic about your how you go about it is definitely a good thing. I forgot where I was going with this point.
It's all good, man. A point that I wanted to throw in there was, like, for me too, Tony Sanders says his better low grade than no grade, right? That's how he rolls, and that's totally cool. I respect it. And there's a lot of people that go that way. But for me, if I'm looking at a modern book, if I'm going to own that book to have as part of my collection that I want to hold on to forever, I want a 9.8 in a modern book. You know, like for me, a 9.8 or a 9.6, I will wait and save up money to get that 9.8 so that I have it finally and it's done and it's a part of my collection that's not going anywhere.
Right.
Because if I get that 9.6, it's great. And it could lead me to sell later and get, so that's okay if I'm thinking about doing that too, you know?
Right.
But for me, like, if I get that 9.6, I'm always going to be like, oh man, I got the 9.6, man. Like, I need the 9.8, you know what I mean? Yeah,
so,
man.
You know, and I have a little bit of that because I asked you kind of what your line was on the high side of like when you would settle for less.
Yeah.
For me, like, as I've gone about it, like I've started thinking about, you know, if I'm going to chase a slab book, if I really want a slab copy, which for the most part I chase raw books. I'm not gonna lie, again for budgetary purposes. But if I'm going to chase a slab book, like it's basically in that $150 or less range. There's a reason I went to the $200 mark.
Yeah.
Because for then, like the percentages are still good, but the actual number is not that big of a difference to go on and get that 9.8. If you're talking about $120 9.8 versus a $85 9.6,
yeah.
I mean, you're not really, that's to me at that point, the value isn't really making that big of a difference.
Yeah.
You know, I did, of course, I broke that rule last year for a book, a series, a run I really liked that I'd only read digitally. I really wanted the first Gotham City Sirens number one. And
nice.
You know, this is a 9.4. But this literally, I couldn't have bought a raw copy and taken the chance of it being even less grade than a 9.4 because you never know.
Yeah.
And slabbed it for what I paid for this.
So you got a great deal.
I got a great deal. So I'm perfectly happy. And honestly, if I was ever going to like turn it, this book, basically it has like the reason it's got a 9.4 is it's got a dent in this bottom corner that doesn't break color. So I'm pretty sure if I ever really wanted to like
crack it.
Yeah, it's not really, the value difference right now isn't really worth it to bump it to a 9.8. It just so happens with this particular one, I probably could crack it. And I don't know if I get to a 9.8, but I think I'd get to a 9.6 pretty easy. But it was just like, literally I paid with shipping $50 for this. Oh. So I had, and part of that was I had some eBay bucks, and then, there was a little bit of eBay bucks I put toward it and that kind of stuff. But with shipping, I paid $50. I can't buy a raw copy and get it slabbed, and it might have come back a 9.4 for what I paid.
Right.
So that's just kind of, you know, I constantly think about, you know, what's the best decision for me? What's the best budgetarily? Let's see. We have Discovery Bay has joined us. I think he was actually been in there for a while. Hey, JB. Thomas Churchill is in here. I want to thank you guys for joining us. As I said, we're just talking a little bit about our philosophy on, you know, whether or not to chase the 9.8. When do you not? When do you push for it? And like I said, if it's a lower range book where the value, even though there's still like the percentage difference is still there, but the actual monetary difference is not much, then I'm going to go on and push for a 9.8. Anything that I can get a 9.8 for under $100, if I really want it slabbed, then I'm going to go on and jump on it at a 9.8. It doesn't make sense not to at that point to me.
Yeah.
If you're going to do the expense of getting it slabbed. Now, having said that, I just showed an example where I didn't because value was just too good. But like in general, I'm probably going to like going forward. That's probably like the goal would be a 9.8. I agree with you. Like there's a lot of books. I think like part of the thing I've heard some other people say is collect the book, not the grade. And that's really what I'm about. And I think that's oversimplifying the 9.8 thing, at least in my mind.
Look at Jay Hood, man. Look at his comment.
But I have 0 slabs, and I feel the peer pressure from YouTube to go buy 9.8 leather bag to fit in.
Sorry, brother. I'm sorry, man.
No, don't feel the pressure. Like, literally, now I did recently at PlanetCon, if you guys have seen the video, I did make my first submissions to get books slabbed. They were all books. I kind of wanted to try it and see if it was for me, is really what it was about more than anything. 3 of the books I sent off are books that I didn't get signed, that are just never leaving my collection anyway. So I thought, what the heck? Might as well protect them. The other 3 were 3 books I got signed. And it was really just an effort to see if I liked the whole slabbing side of things, if that's something I wanted to pursue with some other books that I have, some of which are behind me. But there are books I will probably buy some slabs. I like them, but I also like reading books. So it's kind of it really will depend on value. It really depends on the deal. Because I was honestly looking for a really nice raw copy of this when I found this.
Cool.
But I have it digitally. I can go read it whenever I want. And so in this case, it was like, it made sense for me to chase the slab and that kind of thing, just from Jay Hood's perspective.
Yeah.
And really says, don't do it. It's addictive as everything else about this hobby.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you can attest to that.
Man, there are so many times when I have the fever, and that I make dumb buying decisions, and that's why I've really decided to focus.
Right.
And 2 of the things that I want to point out too is, for me, is space and budget.
Right.
Because I opened up a business. The Boy Who Had 7 is actually a business, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm still testing the waters of buying and selling and trading and then collecting at the same time. And so I've got a pretty good budget. And if I didn't have the same budget, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is those space. Like, I have 7 kids. My wife and I, we're running out of room in the house. And I was looking at all my boxes upstairs. I have one of those professional racks, Yeah. And it's just full of boxes, man. And I'm running out of space up there. And so I was thinking, where am I going to put all these books? Because I collect 20 a week for New Comic Book Day. I'm reading a lot, man. And so I'm thinking, I'm running out of space. Do I want to keep collecting runs? Because at first I was going to go with ASM, and I'm going to be like, okay, I want number 200 through the end. Right. And I was going to do that, man. I wanted Fantastic Four, every Fantastic Four book since number 1 and on. And then I thought, there's just zero room for me, man. And so, and what made me think of it is that you said digitally. I've got my ASM 300 and 9.8 white pages, but I've also got it digitally, And so if I want to read it, I'm going to read it. And then I've also got it to collect and to have there, And Venom's one of my favorite characters. He's literally my favorite villain, along with Thanos in the Marvel Universe. So I had to have that book, So, man, it's just the budget and the space is what's really pushing me to change to slab collecting and to go high on those slabs, because I'm only going to be able to collect so much because of the price point.
Right.
And so it works for both the space and the budget.
Right. You're focusing not just in terms of you have a budget that you're working within, and then you're maximizing, knowing what your space limitations are. You're maximizing within that budget on specific books that you really want.
Yeah.
And and it's one of the things that I really hadn't registered when I got back in. I got rid of a bunch of comics when I moved the last time here, which was 16 years ago now, when I came back from Virginia in grad school. And I basically, my comic collection for 14 years was in a 4-drawer file cabinet downstairs.
Yeah.
That was the entire collection was in that one cabinet.
Love it.
And in the last year, I've went from that cabinet. Right now, I only have one drawer of that cabinet with books in it. But I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11 short boxes. Yeah. In a year. And it's what the heck happened?
The addiction is real.
Yeah, the addiction is real. And now, not all of these, I have 11 short boxes. Not all of them are full. They have space. I have different series and that kind of stuff.
Cool.
I've not maxed out 11 short boxes yet. If I put all the books that I currently have in all the boxes, I still have some downstairs, I would still have space. But in a month or so, I probably won't, because I keep collecting. And so, but for me, I've really I have bounced through 4 or 5 different stages of how I want to collect
Yep.
in the last year, like since I got back in. I made several mistakes, like everybody does. When I first got back in, I was chasing hot variants, and I was chasing the CBSI Hot 10 books, which is where my whole video came from.
Yeah, which I love, by the way.
I was chasing things that I don't really want in my collection. That's not what I'm about. Like when I originally was going to make my channel, I had some weird title like that had to do with bats and spiders. Because realistically, I'm a Batman collector and the Bat family, and I'm a Spider-Man collector. Like the other characters
Can't go wrong with that.
Are like I like some other characters, like Justice League stuff I'll collect. I do. There's some other characters that I like. I'll read some Avengers and that kind of stuff. But really, in terms of my collection, ultimately, I want to get to a place where I'll have a few other key books for characters that I really like. But in terms of runs and collection, I really want it's Bat characters. Nightwing's my favorite characters we've talked about, or as I've talked about on several occasions. Batman, Batgirl, Catwoman. The whole kind of Gotham area is like really my favorite story arc, and then the spiders. Pete and the new Spider-Gwen I'm enjoying, and other things. Those are the characters that I want to collect, and I do go through a lot. And I think ultimately, my expectation is I will get to a place where you're at on some of those key books that I will want the 9.8 of specific books.
Yeah.
There's other books I think I will always be in a place where, like this book that I showed the 9.4 of, I'm okay if this is always a 9.4.
Yeah.
Like, I may press, like if the value for some reason were to shoot up, I might press it and try to bump it. But I'm probably never going to go over on this book because like it means something to me, but I'm okay with this one being, but it doesn't mean enough that I feel like I have to chase the 9.8.
Yeah.
On that particular book.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a slightly different version of your philosophy of where you're at.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there might be a coming day where it's worth it to move it and try to bump to a 9.8, but I don't see it. I think there's other books that I'd rather focus on getting to that 9.8 level. Like the book beside you, which I'm actually hoping I already have, will come back as Teen Titans 44, first decoration is Nightwing. I'm hoping I have a 9.8. I'm hoping it's sent off right now and it's coming back. But if it comes back at 96, I will probably try to hunt another raw copy to try to get to the 9.8. Or,
let me know, because these two are for sale, so I can hook you up with a good deal.
Well, we'll see when it comes back.
I hope you get that 9.8. I do.
Like that's a book that means enough to me because that character means so much to me.
Yeah.
I want it in a 9.8. Like, and I don't know what this will come back. Like, there's a book, and this book has limited value. And I don't know what my original copy will come back as. Probably like a 9.4 or something.
Nice.
But I will probably, because this is the book that turned me into any kind of a collector.
Really?
This book, this run, is still one of my all-time favorites. Like, I'll eventually want this in a 9.8.
Cool.
But I'll never get rid of this copy no matter what it grades as because it has sentimental value. But I probably will eventually get it graded. So I do think, like, I don't think that, for me personally, I don't think that the 9.8 thing is for everybody.
Yeah.
But I do think that, I understand the value of those that chase it. Yeah. But I also think there's a lot of value out there if you're willing to not go for 9.8s, if you're looking for specific books, particularly if you're on a lower budget, there's a lot of value in not selling and going with a 9.6 or a 9.4. And I'll be perfectly honest, until I looked up the grader's notes to figure out what the defect was, I couldn't find it.
Really?
Because it doesn't break color.
Yeah.
And like, to me, I was like, I could not figure out why this book was a 9.4. And luckily, because it's a CBCS, I can just look up the grader's notes. I don't have to have been the one to submit it or have
spend the money.
yeah, spend the money to like get the graders notes. But like, and then once I read the graders notes, I'm like, oh, and I knew right where to look. I'm like, okay, I can see that now. I see what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So for me, as long as the book really presents well, and like this book here, now this book I couldn't bump. Like I know what the flaws are. Like I looked at the graders notes on this one. This one you won't bump. This is all you're going to get. But this is another book that I probably will never bother to pay the premium for.
Yeah.
To get to a 9.8. I'm perfectly happy with my 9.6. I say that maybe you've been back in what, 4 years, almost going 5 years since you started collecting again.
Yeah.
4 years from now, maybe I'll have a different philosophy. Maybe I'll be in a different place as a collector.
Yeah.
But I do think that like I said, there can be value in avoiding paying that premium, depending on what your goals are and what your priorities are.
You know, that's a good point, because Thomas Churchill's saying if he gets a 9.8, he's always tempted to sell it. And it's true. I've got some books that have doubled or tripled in price. And for instance, my GSX one, that's one that I couldn't afford in the 9.8. I was going to have to drop about 9-10 grand for that, you know? So I'm like, okay, that's out of my price range. I'd rather spend that on a FF1 or Amazing Fantasy 15 than a GSX one, you know?
Yeah.
But I got mine in a 9.2. I paid under $1,800 for it. And one just sold on eBay last week for like $5,200. So it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I've actually been entertaining that thought. Like, I could sell that book, make a $3,000, $4,000 profit, and then go get something really nice that I want, you know?
Right. And then you could probably find, you know, if you're willing to accept it, you can probably replace it with a lower grade GSX and one or two other books that you don't have.
Yep.
If you're willing to accept that lower grade. So I think it just depends on, it really depends on the book specifically and your priorities as a collector, where you're at and what your goals are, and whether or not the 9.8 is the way to go. Yeah. And now that's not, you know, if you're chasing a 9.8 via raw copies, well, that's a little different thing, but you're always taking a risk there. But as far as if you're going after slabs, and like some of these books, you know, there's enough books that are restored and that kind of thing, and they're valuable enough that it's hard to chase a raw copy just because you never know what the heck you're going to get sometimes. But but let's see who else. Yeah, GSX has been crazy. Just there's some books, and now is a time that like there's several books that are related to, and this is a little off topic, but related to just on your point of being tempted to sell. X-Men movies, Fantastic Four, because the Disney purchase that have just been going skyrocketing.
Yep.
And what you talked about earlier with your Deadpool, where you waited.
Yep.
Like if you wanted to, and I don't know that it'll ever come back to the values, but you could probably, if you timed it right, you could probably sell that GSX, make a profit, and then get back into fairly close grade for probably less, because it'll probably cool back down at some point.
Yeah.
You know, the movies are, now that's a book that's always going to trend upward.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say on that book.
On that book, it's always going to trend upward, but it's not going to trend upward at the rate that it currently is.
It's true.
I don't think.
I agree with you on that.
So, yeah, that's a book, it's old enough, it's a little tricky, whereas like that New Mutants 98, that's a late 80s, early 90s book. There's a billion of those suckers out there.
There are.
And so, actually, I guess that would be early 90s. So,
yeah, I think 91.
So, yeah, there's also that factor you have to think in, is how easily can I get back into this book if I wanted to, when it comes to like turning your 9.8.
Yeah.
You know, if I want to get back into it, and what are raw copies going for? And that's not something we really discussed today, because I feel like that's a whole different subject matter.
It is, totally.
You know, that slab, because there's a premium for a 9.8 slab, but there's also a slab premium. But, you know, versus chasing a raw copy, but you might have to go through a couple of raw copies before you get the one that's going to give you that high value.
Yeah.
Because I personally, like, you know, but I do find it funny that book that's rated as near mint plus, which is what a 9.6 rating is.
Yeah.
You know, like, and people, you watch the unboxings and people send their books off and they get them back and they open it up and it's like 9.6, son of a, you know. Like, oh, that.
Well, that's what it was graded at.
You know, they got all upset that the near mint plus book.
Yeah.
But it is because of we all chase the premium, and we talked about this, I think, before the show, and I don't think we've actually brought it up during. Is as collectors, and you talked about being competitive. A 9.8 is real for most books, unless it's a Batman Damned, is realistically the highest grade we can realistically achieve.
Yeah.
In most books, because a 9.9 are 10s, unless they're like that prestige format that they just don't exist.
Yep.
And not in any kind of numbers that you can get them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So by default, a 9.8 in the collecting community has become a 10. It is the highest that you're realistically going to achieve.
Yep.
And that is why it has gotten the premium, that 50% difference that I talked about. That's why people are paying it.
Yeah.
Because they can't beat that. You know, if 9.9s were achievable, the price thing with the premium would shift. It would immediately go like on a Batman Damned, like the premium is the 10 versus a 9.9. And a 9.8 isn't worth hardly anything. You can get raw copies for what you can get a 9.8 for.
Yep.
And so it obviously is just that shift, that perspective of what is the best possible version of this book I can get, because as collectors, like you said, you're competitive. It's not that you're competitive in that you want you want to see somebody else have worse books than you necessarily.
Yeah, no way.
But you want to have the best books that you can have for your collection. You want to be able to be like, this is my collection.
Yeah, man.
You want to be proud of it. And
I want to swim like Scrooge McDuck one day in my 9.8s, man.
DJ. Gonna be the slab dragon.
Yes, man. Like his room, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I call him. I was like, man, you are Scrooge McDuck. You got it all. I was looking at a 9.8 for a Hulk 181 in 2011. Okay, one sold for $9,000.
Wow.
If that book was available right now, I would buy it all day long in a 9.8. Why? Because it just sold last month for $50,000.
Yeah, there was one at Planet Con. They had one of the booths had a 9.8 181.
What were they asking? Do you know at all?
I didn't even like, there was a bunch of people standing around. I just was like, holy moly.
Yeah, man.
And I wandered off. There was a 9.4 that I forget. They were asking like 15 or something. I forget now what they were, but I didn't even ask because I didn't even want to know. I was just like, oh my God.
You know what kills me?
Burke or D-Runk might have asked. They would probably know, but I don't remember. I was just like, the fact that it's there and you brought it to a con to sell, and I was like, man, that'd be in a vault.
I had a guy offer me, he wanted to sell me his Werewolf by Night 32, so the first Moon Knight,
right,
for like $2,800 in the 9.8 white pages, like 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I was like, no, because back then I wasn't paying that much money for books. I was like, no, man, like the most I'll spend is like $250. So I passed on it. And one just sold last month for $50,000 too. And I'm like, imagine I had bought that. Like, I would be so tempted to sell that book right now, man.
And that is a book I personally do not understand. I think Moon Knight's a good character, but I don't understand why that book is that much.
It's crazy. It just shot up.
Yeah. And I don't like it. It's a good character, but not that much. And so,
yeah, there's something going on with that. It's just a cult following. I don't know. Whispers, But J Hood Creative asked me, so would I say I was competing against myself? I think so. Because I'm always trying to, even I look at the copies that I have, and I've had 4 Amazing Spider-Man 360 ones over the last 2 months that I've sold.
Right.
because I'll purchase a copy at a good price. I'll look at it. I'm like, it's not the perfect one, man. So I sell it, and then I get another one. It's not the perfect one. I've literally sold 4 of them, and now I have 0. And now they're trending up, and I'm like, what did I do? You know. So I don't know. I'm looking for the perfect copy. I am, and 100% honesty. When I see your 9.6 Spider Gwen, I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
There's nothing in my bones that makes me think, oh, I'm better than you because I got an 9.8. That's not the type of human being I am, man.
Right. No.
So for me, all day long, I'm like, I need that 9.8. But when I see you pull that out, I'm excited for you. Like I want to geek out with you. You know what I'm saying? Because that's your copy that you got.
That's my copy, and I got a hell of a deal on it, and especially with where it's went since, and so I am super happy with that book. And even though, and it's one of those things that like I talk about being competitive. You're competitive with yourself, and I say I won't ever upgrade it because at this point, and that may not be true, but where I'm at as a collector, there's other books that I can spend the money it would take to upgrade this.
Yeah.
I can spend that on other books that I want.
Yeah.
And
Fallout 4.
And then once I get some of those books, then maybe that priority shifts. And then maybe I look back and say, oh, I'd like to have a 9.8. But by then that book is probably like $1,000 book. And maybe I'm probably still going to be like, nope, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good.
So it just kind of depends on how the trends go. But let's see.
You pointed something out earlier too, man. You're saying that in 4 years your collecting is going to be different. I guarantee my collecting is going to be different in a year.
Yeah.
Like already in my mind, I've been thinking about now trying to find raw copies, trying to get those slabbed, and then selling them. Right. I've really had this desire to start finding the best copies I can out there, slabbing them, and then turning them for a profit, And
Right.
It's exciting to think about that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 2 years.
Right. And I think that is, we all are continually evolving as collectors. 2 years ago, and if I turned the camera, you would see I was all about it. I don't even have to turn the camera because there's a bunch of them sitting on my desk. I was all about these.
Oh yeah.
And I was collecting a bunch, and I still have a bunch. I've moved some.
Oh, sweet.
Oh yeah, that was Kevin Conroy last year.
Dude, that's awesome, man.
So that was really sweet. That one's never leaving. But
that's cool.
And then I found comic books again, and now I've bought maybe 6 pops in the last year.
Yeah, totally changed. Huh?
It's just my priority shifted, and my priority has shifted a couple times in terms of comics, and I'm constantly evaluating, where I'm at as a collector and really what I want to do, because I still am unsure. There's books that are on my list. I'm like, do I really need that book? Do I really want that book?
Yeah.
And I think the reason I have this Collecting Smart series, and I want to talk about 9.8's and any of the subjects I talk about on here, is I'm constantly thinking about what I want to do as a collector and what's the right decision for me. And I don't always make it, and then I have to figure it out after the fact. So I hope that by having these conversations, it gets people thinking about these things before they make decisions in terms of, oh, I'm going to buy that, and then go, why is this a part of my collection? And so that's kind of the goal. That's why I wanted to talk about this is, he talked about this earlier, and I didn't really touch on it at the time. I forget if it was Thomas or Jay Hood talked about, all the pressure from YouTube to buy slabs. And I want my channel to be the opposite of that. And I think your channel, you do a lot with your amateur hour stuff. You've done a good job of this too. I don't want my channel anybody to come on my channel and feel like, oh, I should buy that book because Jason said something about it.
Yeah.
I want them to come to my channel and leave my channel thinking, okay, I've gotten some information. I need to go get some more information so that I make the right decision for me
For
on whether or
myself.
not that is a book I want.
Yeah.
That's a book I should invest in. That is why, like, the whole goal of the look back is so that you can, is to try to show patterns of what books are true. Because obviously, if it's on the list at the moment, it's the wrong time to buy it anyway, no matter what the book is.
Oh,
if
yeah.
It's on that hot top 10 list. But generally, like, what are the books that actually are going to sustain, and which books are just flash in the pans because somebody, Donnie Cates, said the word Endgame or Carnage Mind Bomb was a favorite story, or you know, something that. But
went in the dollar bins to the $100 bin.
Yeah, it's ultimately this dollar bin book is eventually may never go back to the dollar bin because now it has something linked to it, and people start paying a little bit, but it's probably going to become a $5 book.
Yeah,
and it's never going to be like. It doesn't have a true first appearance. It doesn't have something in it that truly gets value. And even if it does, is it a character that has any kind of staying power?
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think it all kind of wraps into the one discussion of just trying to make smart decisions for you as a collector. And and I'm not the first person to coin this and won't be the last, but there's no right, in my book, there's no right or wrong way to collect. Like you and I collect very differently. I'm super impressed by your collection. I think it's awesome. I know it's not where I'm going to go, at least at this time, with my collection.
Yeah.
But that's the way you want to collect. And I think that's amazing. Like you said, you were super happy for me. I'm super happy for you that you found a goal and you found where you want to go as a collector, and you're able to follow through with it, and you're doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. And I think,
thanks,
man. There's no right, like we said, no right or wrong way to collect. There's your way to collect. And it's about making the choices that are smart for you.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, Jay Hood was had some good stuff he was saying, and it brought up some things I wanted to share. You know that the Batman book behind you? I went on a hunting spree to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was looking for some specific books, man. And I found 4 copies near mint plus of that book, man.
Right.
And all for a cover price. And that feeling, man, when you find something you're looking for and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get this slab and I'm gonna make some money, you know. Just last month I went to Albuquerque again and I found like 5 copies of Naomi 1.
Right.
And all cover price. I just sold 2 of them this last week for $75 each.
Right.
You know, like he's saying he has a hard time getting rid of some of his books, but once you feel that feeling of finding the book and you're paying $3 for it and you're going to be able to throw it on Instagram and sell it for $75, $100, it's such a good feeling, man.
Yeah. And it's weird because I've seen you do that, and I've seen some of the things, and I've heard your stories where you found some books, and I've had some opportunities where I could have done that. And at this stage, I really haven't. Like I showed you earlier, and if anybody watched my video last night, I showed off the books I'm giving away when I dropped my giveaway video, which starts on Wednesday. My 220 subscriber video, even though I'm not quite to 220 yet. I think I'm at 209. But I'm going to start the contest on Wednesday.
Sweet.
And it'll run for a month, and people have a chance to win. And I'm giving away some Immortal Hulk books. Well, at the time I bought those, my LCS had a ton of Immortal Hulk books.
Oh.
Like I could have. Now they didn't have any 2s left. But they had a bunch of number 1s, a couple of number 3s, some number 5s. They had a ton of number 1s left.
I think she's outside.
And I bought, I think, 4 number 1s, plus a couple of the variant copies. And I did do them, but I did not buy them out because I didn't want to put out the effort to try to sell them.
You know what? That's a good point. It's a good point.
Because it is work. It is,
it is work.
You're making a commitment. You're putting out the effort. And I was like, all right. And I sold 3 copies of number 1, and I sold a couple of other books. But I haven't sold many books because I'm not really. I don't know. I just haven't been willing to put out the effort it takes to sell that.
Yeah, you got to be committed to do it, man, because
It's a commitment, and I respect those people that do it. I'm not at that stage where I'm really wanting to do that. But yeah, I love this book. If anybody's watched my channel, I talked about Nightwing earlier. Of course, that gives you an idea of when I started really collecting and reading. This whole No Man's Land series, I have almost the whole thing. I'm missing a few issues.
Awesome, man.
But so I remember this storyline, and then the fact that they're using her. She is one of my favorite Bat characters that I feel like is most underutilized.
Yeah.
People forget that the first Batgirl series was her and not Barbara Gordon. They never gave Barbara Gordon a Batgirl series.
Yeah.
And it ran for a long time. I think it got up to like 90-some issues almost before they ended. At least 60
I
or
realize it. Wow.
And, it was a popular thing, but then they really haven't used her for the last decade very much. I mean, she's in a little bit, but so it's just like a book that means, but so it was funny to me that this is now suddenly, because she's going to be in the movie, it's got a book that has value, and it never really did before.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's another copy and it's a really nice copy. I don't know that it's a 9.8, but that's a really nice copy. It's weird, the books that I have, that some of the books I feel like I read the most are still in really good shape, and then some of the books I feel like I didn't read that much, and I look at them and I'm like, man, this book is so what? What the heck is this book?
Oh, man. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, I think we've been almost an hour. I think we've kind of run our course on 9.8. We've been talking about some other stuff here. I want to thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. We may have to do this again. You got anything coming up on your channel you want to talk about?
You know what? This week we're taking a break with Amateur Hour and with Willpower Unleashed because of Endgame, man.
Okay.
I am so stinking excited, bro.
Nice.
Like, I woke up this morning, I'm like, 4 days. Like, I can't wait, man.
Thursday.
Yeah. So, but next week we'll be doing Amateur Hour again. We're gonna have Mr. Gorell. He's gonna be our first guest, and then I think on Wednesday we'll also be doing a Willpower Unleashed. So, I guess stick around for next week. Take a look at that. But, dude, I loved hanging out with you tonight.
Oh, me too.
Like bros, like talking. So I definitely want to do this again if we can, man.
Definitely, I will definitely have you back. So this has been great. For anybody on my channel, I'm going to drop finally my PlanetCon highlight video tomorrow night. It's just a recorded thing. It's going to drop around 6, and it has PlanetCon highlights as well as my interview with Kevin McCoy, who did that Catwoman and Black Cat sketch covers for me. This kickoff of my contest will drop Wednesday night if I can get it recorded. I need to get it recorded so I can do that. And then next Monday, and basically this time slot, is the second episode of Gotham City Chronicles with Comic Books NYC. Comic Head 84 is going to join us, and we're going to be talking about The Long Halloween.
Oh, dude, nice.
So that is next Monday, and that will be on my channel this time. So with that, thanks everybody for joining us, and we're going to get out of here, and I'm sure there's other stuff to watch. So we will talk to y'all later.
Night, guys.